Hi everyone. When I decided to look into uh, how can one improve agility through cognitive skills training in the attacking footballer, I expected to find some high-tech training methods focusing purely on training the perceptual and cognitive abilities of an athlete. And this is what I found initially, which is high-tech, all right. But the question is, how does this translate to sport-specific requirements? And studies such as Jeffrey's 2008 suggest that drill triggers need to incorporate sport-specific stimuli. Young et al. 2015 also highlights the point that the cognitive skill required to react quickly and accurately is based on a sport-specific stimulus rather than a generic stimulus. So in this presentation, we will look at understanding the agility with a focus on the cognitive element, how and which factors impacting the cognitive function can be trained to improve agility, how cognitive agility training is applied to the attacking footballer attempting to dribble past the defender, and some take-home points. So Shepard and Young 2006 defined agility as a rapid whole body movement with change of velocity or direction in response to a stimulus. Young et al. 2015 highlighted that the cognitive element is a main component of agility alongside the physical and technical elements, and that this cognitive element allows an athlete to process and react the stimulus accordingly. Now, Vives and Roberts, 2005, break down the cognitive element as follows. Firstly, they define the time it takes from stimulus detection to completing the specific movement or task as the total response time. The mental processing speed or reaction time component of the total response time is broken down into the sensation, perception, and response selection stages. The sensation stage is the time interval that elapses whilst the athlete detects the sensory input from an object or the environment. This is followed by the perception stage, or the length of time needed to acknowledge and correlate the array of sensations discovered at the sensation stage. The final stage of this mental processing is the response selection, or the decision making stage, which is the time required for the athlete to organize a response or take a decision to not respond to the object or environment stimulus. Young 2015, Young et al. 2015, as well as Vives and Roberts 2005, suggest choice of stimulus, visual scanning, pattern recognition, knowledge of situation, and anticipation as factors impacting the perceptual cognitive aspect of agility. So, as mentioned at the start of the presentation, I was unable to find training that is purely cognitive, that utilizes sport-specific stimuli, and studies highlight the need to utilize sport-specific stimuli if the cognitive element of agility is to be trained successfully. In fact, the training methods found to improve cognitive skills that could translate in improved agility are based on an integrated approach rather than cognitive training separate from the other elements of agility. Jeffrey's 2006 and 2008 articles propose a motor learning task-based approach in which agility can be deconstructed into target movement patterns, each with their function incorporating the cognitive element throughout the various development stages. I shall be using this as the basis of the cognitive skill acquisition process in agility. So for instance, if one were to deconstruct the movement patterns of the blue-kitted player in possession of the ball, the player basically initiates the dribble by decelerating, transitioning to the right using a cut step, to then accelerate away and past the tackling defender. These movement patterns will need to be trained in a way to achieve a level of automation as well as stability, and to then contextualize these movements in the game by incorporating sport-specific stimuli to develop the footballer's cognitive ability to read and react to sport-specific key cues. Throughout these steps, mistakes need to be interpreted and corrected through augmented feedback and guided discovery at all stages. Jeffries 2008 specifies that agility is improved through a development program that initially trains the simple, close-skilled tasks before then moving on to the more complex, random open-skilled tasks. So if one were to apply this training process to football, how will we train the cognitive element to improve agility of an attacking footballer in the dribbling phase? By looking first at the top left quadrant on the slide, one would want to start off by having the athlete practice the basic drills as building blocks in preparation of more complex scenarios and initiating focus on these single task skills. Here we are talking of the likes of deceleration, drop step, cut step, acceleration, amongst others. Initially, these should be performed in an uncompetitive manner with focus on movement quality, not speed. At this stage, these tasks also need to be trained in blocked practice, and as the athletes become more proficient, to then train these tasks in random order. Once these movements become automated, when performed individually, these movements should be combined together, such as accelerating, followed immediately by deceleration, and then accelerating again, ensuring that the movement does not break down when transitioning from one movement to the next. The element of speed can be introduced slowly, first without the ball, and then with the ball. Although this phase of training does not train the mental processing speed directly, being able to execute movement patterns at speed in an automated and stable manner will allow the player to focus on other aspects that support the mental processing speed indirectly. So for instance, the confidence and proficiency in movement will allow a player to take their eyes off the ball and scan whilst accelerating to allow an increased quantity and quality of information brought into the brain for cognitive processing. More complex and contextualized scenarios, which we will be talking about next, will work on the likes of distance, visual acuity, peripheral vision, and depth perception. And improving these visual factors will not only increase the field of vision of the player, but it will also pick up position, velocity, and acceleration of a stimulus more precisely. In the next steps, training will progress so as to start contextualizing movement patterns by incorporating sport-specific stimuli, to then develop the footballer's cognitive ability to read and react to sport-specific key cues. Thus, an element of temporal uncertainty would be applied where the pre-planned movement is initiated in response to a stimulus, where timing of when this will happen is uncertain. For instance, when a task is presented to the attacking player, where a defender will tackle the ball carrier without taking the ball in a pre-planned move, and the ball carrier or attacking player knows how and where the defender will tackle, but does not know when the defender will commit. And as soon as the defender commits and is off balance, the ball carrier will react to the tackle and dribble past the defender. This way, the attacker will start to gain knowledge of such situations to then recognize and recall on patterns of and anticipate when a defender is off balance when the need to get past defenders arises. The contextualizing movements will also be incorporated in a way such that there is an element of spatial uncertainty, where the movement that is not pre-planned is initiated in response to a stimulus, but timing of movement is pre-planned. For instance, knowing the timing of a run of a teammate, but not knowing where the teammate will be moving to. Again, such an exercise will teach the attacking player to recognize patterns of when a defender gets out of position, creating space for a successful dribble. Thus, both the spatial and the temporal training tasks will start to work and improve on a player's anticipation, knowledge of a situation, and pattern recognition at the basic level, in preparation for the more complex contextualizing training tasks. At the most complex stage, and the one closest to representing actual gameplay, universal tasks offer both temporal and spatial uncertainty. This would consist of a 1v1, this time with a fully active defender, up to a 2v2 possibly, and subsequently also to a 3v3. And the cognitive complexity can be increased further by adding more goals or gates to score through, and or possibly using two footballs instead of one, thus increasing more stimuli. In all cases, stimuli provided are not only specific to football, but more specifically to the ball carrier dribbling past the defender. The player is exposed to one stimulus at a time initially, and each stimulus would train either the spatial or temporal element of an action. Eventually, players are trained to a stimulus that consists of both the spatial as well as temporal elements, and subsequently multiple stimuli. So the presence of multiple stimuli will demand players perceive and process data quicker. For instance, in the picture on the left, the attacking player is scanning whilst running fast with the ball, responding to ball movement, the defender's movement and position, the teammates run to his right, whilst keeping in mind his own position on the pitch. In the picture on the right, the attacking player has to check his run and change direction quickly as a new stimulus, that of a second defender, comes into play. Jeffries 2006 suggests that Schmidt's schema theory of generalized motor programs provides a model that explains and supports this development of cognitive skills in football with its multitude of movement situations. And by exposing players to sport-specific stimuli and gameplay situations in the way explained, the motor learning approach used, based on Smith's schema theory of generalized motor program, hypothesizes that this training will improve pattern recognition, knowledge of the situation, and ultimately anticipation. The approach taken to develop the cognitive element of agility is a task-based approach, and this is based on research supporting the construction of effective skill learning environments addressing context-specific perception action cycles. Using practice alone without appropriate feedback will not achieve the desired results. And Jeffries 2008 mentions augmented feedback and guided discovery. One example that comes to mind is when overseeing a 1v1 exercise where the ball carrier tries to dribble past the defender. When the attacking player dribbles past the defender after failed attempts, I, as the coach, would ask the attacker what he or she noticed that resulted in a different outcome to allow guided discovery. And by identifying the moment a defender is off balance, the attacking player has increased knowledge of this situation and can anticipate which movements can predispose a defender to becoming off balance. Similarly, if I want to teach a player to take up the correct athletic position before taking on a defender, I would use external cues, such as I should be able to slide a piece of paper under your heels, or imagine you're about to sit on a chair but stop halfway. At the end of it all, some important take points I feel, which have increased my knowledge on how one can improve the cognitive element of agility. And firstly, of note is the lack of studies that specifically target visual scanning, anticipation, pattern recognition, and knowledge of the situation. Moreover, in the setting of the sport of interest, mainly because it's difficult to measure parameters in the actual sport setting, but also the understanding of these parameters is still relatively vague. Current research suggests cognitive elements in agility needs to be trained in an integrated and contextualized approach related to the key movement patterns and perceptual cues present in the sport. The faster the brain learns how to process sport-specific stimuli, the quicker an athlete evaluates a situation, which in turn is thought to contribute to a quicker execution of movements. Cognitive training as a part again of an integrated and contextualized task-based approach may improve a player's positioning and indirectly help with maximizing neuromuscular control and or force application capabilities throughout the movement. Thank you all and take care.